So I am representing Switzerland Global Enterprise. Switzerland Global Enterprise has two sections, but the main thing is they are promoting export and import into Switzerland and out of Switzerland. So export, you can see, has started already very, very early in 1927, whereas the invest promotion into Switzerland is only established since 2008. But we are working here for a new mandate that last year went through the Federal Council. It's called the Large Infrastructure Mandate that should enhance the participation of Swiss enterprises in large international infrastructure projects. This is done by a so-called Team Switzerland approach. This is more than one entity, not only Switzerland Global Enterprise, but also the associations, SERF, but also SECO very strongly, and we have a liaison office. They are all together fostering these initiatives. What is today about? It's for you as a private sector entities to better understand how the banks work, but it's also in establishing and maintaining relationships. It is to showcase Swiss expertise. This is your job actually then, to showcase towards the banks what can we do especially good and why should they use Swiss expertise for their projects. You will learn that it's not going directly to them because they are not giving the money directly, but we will learn this later. And naturally, it is to network with one another. And it's also with the team Switzerland Infrastructure, and there I'm surprising some of my colleagues because this is our experts that will be in the countries. We have the experts from Indonesia, Africa, and Brazil here. Would you quickly step up that people know? These are the Team Switzerland experts that are in the countries. If you're interested to collaborate with them, especially the banks, they are here. Then it's our colleagues from SERF. It's Dominique. And did Carsten, I haven't seen him. He was supposed to be here. He's not here yet. He might be coming. But naturally also Swiss Rail. I've seen Florian here. Florian, show yourself. Transportation is over there. Then we have naturally for the representation of the mandate, we have our liaison office. That is Rita and her colleagues. And last but not least, my colleagues from SG that have supported me in organizing this event. Would you please step up quickly? Who is there? Benjamin, David, in the background. This is us. So this is how to interact with us. This has already been all from me. We will be going on now with the representation on presentation of the banks. I would please ask to stage Maria I learned it so long and it broke my tongue. Jan van Bilsen, Dirk Poelt, Leila Mokaram, Fazia Pusteira, and Oliver Leonard. They will introduce you to the work of their different banks. I give you the stage, Maria.
Thank you very much. Don't feel bad about my surname, it's difficult.
Tell me again, tell us again.
Dimitriadou. And if I make it a little bit more difficult, Dimitriadou in my own language, Greek. So thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm delighted to be here. I'm extra delighted to be joined by my esteemed colleagues from other multilateral development banks. Allow me very quickly with my colleague and friend Jan van Bilsen, who is the country manager for IFC for Switzerland, Austria, the Czech Republic, Germany, Hungary, and the Slovak Republic, to present very quickly who we are in the World Bank Group, what we do, and how you can engage with us. So very, very briefly, we have a very small set of slides for you, but then we have added a great number of detailed slides for you in the annex that you can take home with the links and the more detailed information that you can use to navigate the institution. So with 189 member states, staff from 170 countries, and offices in over 130 countries around the world, the World Bank Group comprises 5 institutions that are working to end poverty and to boost shared prosperity around the world. IBRD, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, provides loans to middle-income and credit-worthy low-income country governments. Together with IDA, our Fund for the Poorest, the International Development Association, which provides interest-free loans and grants to governments of the poorest countries. This comprises the World Bank. This is what when you hear the term World Bank, it includes the IBRD and IDA. Then on the private arm of the World Bank Group, we have IFC. Jan is going to talk in detail about international finance cooperation, providing solutions in private sector development. Private sector is an indispensable part of promoting development. MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, covering non-commercial risk, or as we call it, political risk. And of course, ICSID, the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, that is working on the conciliation and arbitration of investment disputes. This is in a snapshot. Allow me, there's no space. This is in a snapshot where we provide financial support around the world. We work everywhere around the world in all regions. This is what we provided in the last fiscal year 22, which covers basically the period of July 1st to June 30 every year. Together, this amounted to 104 billion US dollars. Together with mobilization of resources, trust funds, it was in the range of 115 billion, over 115 billion US dollars, which was 5 billion higher to the previous year, and it has increased over the last years to support countries address the impact of global compound overlapping crisis that we have seen over the years. Out of this, in the last fiscal year, we provided 31.7 billion US dollars in climate action, and nearly half of that was on climate change adaptation. So I will not talk about trends in an exhaustive way. We can discuss further in the regional sectoral sessions, but one thing I would like to leave with you today is that in the World Bank Group, we mainstream climate action across all our sectors and all our regions because it is very much interlinked with our development mission. On the World Bank, as I mentioned, the bank is providing loans, guarantees, risk management products for middle-income countries and credit-worthy low-income countries. IBRD draws funds from the capital markets, mostly. And to give you a sense, over the last decade, since 1946, the World Bank has provided over 500 billion US dollars in loans, with shareholding governments paying in about 14 billion US dollars in capital. I would like to continue with the IDA, the fund, our fund for the poorest, which basically is being replenished every 3 years, in 3-year cycles. The last year, because of the pressing development challenges in our members that represent the least developed countries, the replenishment cycle was brought forward by 1 year. This package resulted into a 93 billion US dollars package with approximately 23.4 billion in grants from our more developed countries to support the least developed countries there. The instruments are broadly comprising knowledge, analytical work, advisory services, and financing in various different formats, depending on the actual needs and what are the appropriate instruments each time, and always on an evidence-based basis. On the World Bank and how you can engage with us. So the World Bank is working with, of course, client country governments. We're working with bilateral donors, Switzerland, one of them. Of course, multilateral development banks. And as I mentioned climate previously, I would invite you to take a look at the report, the last report we launched on our collective work on climate financing last week ahead of COP27, where you can see the very important work that we've been doing in the multilateral space. We work, of course, with the private sector, UN agencies, other international organizations. I sit in Geneva, where we also collaborate with the WTO and civil society. For you, there are different ways of engaging. We will speak very shortly on operational procurement. So when we finance governments and governments procure in turn, and where you can see opportunities for your services and products, but also corporate procurement, where we as the institution may be needing products or services. So how exactly can you follow what we are doing in each country? In each country, we have one tool which is called systematic country diagnostics. This is basically looking into analyzing in depth the most important developmental challenges that we see at the country level. It's publicly available. This informs in turn the country partnership framework, which is basically explaining where the World Bank Group is focusing based on our strengths, comparative and complementary advantages with other partners at the country level. Then, of course, it includes the performance learning review, what we learn, how we focus on assessing how the implementation of our programs are going. This is midterm in the cycle of the country partnership framework and ex post with the completion and the learning review. We are organized also in regional units. We have included the hyperlinks in all of that, so you can see the mandate of the World Bank Group on addressing, reducing poverty and boosting shared prosperity, how this is interpreted in the vision of the various regions, and then in turn in the vision of the various countries. So with that, I turn to my friend and colleague Jan to continue on IFC, and I'll take it from there for procurement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, very good. Pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for organizing this day. So indeed, as Maria said, IFC, so you may remember one of the first slides that showed, I think here it is, what is it? This one here, where you see indeed IFC as part of the World Bank Group, and the mandate is basically the same. So let me just give you basically some background on where I come from. I joined IFC 20 years ago. I came from ABN AMRO Bank, and in those days, when the annual meetings took place in Washington, like now 1-2 weeks ago, countries who visited wanted to meet the IMF and wanted to meet the World Bank, and not so much IFC. But these days, completely changed. Everybody wants to see IFC. Why? Because everybody realizes that the private sector is the engine of growth and wants to discuss how IFC, and the same for the other MDBs, indeed can help. Another point about IFC, as I said, I worked for a commercial bank before I joined, is that one of the projects I was working on was a project in Zambia. And the bank I worked for, ABN AMRO, had never done anything in Zambia, so we started doing some research. Of course, 20 plus years ago, you didn't have internet. And I figured out that IFC had done 20 projects in those days already in Zambia. So that made me realize that the knowledge that the institution has, plus have an office in Zambia, the knowledge of the local market, knowing who is who are the lawyers, who are the consultants, what are the pitfalls, how to structure deals, etc., is basically present there. And that's basically the point that I want to leave, is for you working in emerging markets, as you all do, either as a consultant or either as an exporter or either as an investor. You want to have reputable, experienced partners on board. People like ourselves, as World Bank Group, as the other MDBs. We have some advantage over some bilateral development banks who are also very, very active, because basically we have a broader shareholder base and we cover basically more countries. So it is important that you have also a strong relationship with the member countries where you operate, actually, right? So let me quickly go through the slides that I have here for IFC. So for IFC, I have some information here. Indeed, as Maria mentioned, part of the World Bank Group, it's sort of the same shareholder that we have, shareholder base. So sort of the whole group, the whole world is a shareholder of the World Bank, except for North Korea and Cuba, and a few small islands is basically the whole world. And we are active in emerging markets. So again, we only are active in emerging markets. We are not active in developed countries, but yes, we do have an office here. I'm based in Frankfurt myself, to work with people like yourselves and with companies to do business in emerging markets. About a quarter of our business has shareholding from Western Europe. About another quarter has shareholding from other developed countries, and about half from emerging markets itself, which luckily is growing. So the world depends less basically on developed countries to do business in emerging markets. So the products that we do as IFC, we are a development finance institution. So we focus very much on companies who invest in emerging markets and need financing for that. And what you see here on the slide, on the left-hand side, is that we offer basically everything on the liability side of the balance sheet, be it from equity, you can become a shareholder, to loans, to even offshore, off-balance sheet products like indeed guarantees and derivatives, etc. We also offer blended finance, so that means IFC works on commercial terms, but we work together with other parties who provide concessional financing and then blend it together. And you see also some numbers there at the bottom of the slide on how much we have done last year and how big the portfolio is. We are about roughly 1/3, a bit bigger than that in the World Bank, our sister organization. But we also mobilize some other parties. So that means it's not only our own money that goes in, we also want to have other parties who finance alongside ourselves. And here in Switzerland, we also have a whole range of parties, banks, but also others who indeed finance alongside ourselves. We also offer technical assistance and advisory services. That is twofold. Number one, it is for our clients, for private sector companies, to help them. For instance, banks who would like to branch out into microfinance or into housing finance, companies who want to improve their corporate governance, for instance, it's the kind of services that we offer. But also increasingly, we work with the governments to improve the investment climate in their countries. Again, we only do private sector, but clearly with the focus working with governments to, as I just said, to improve the business enabling environment in the countries. And also to identify opportunities where we think the private sector can take over from the public sector. Meaning that the countries do not have to finance it themselves, so they reserve that fiscal space for where it is needed most. So think about the energy sector. In most countries around the world, most energy projects are already financed by the private sector rather than by the public sector. So we work with the government to identify, and then together with the colleagues of the World Bank, make the necessary reforms to open up those markets for the private sector to come in. We do work with state-owned enterprises and municipalities, but only if they act on commercial arm's length basis from the government, because otherwise, and without government guarantees, because otherwise it will be public sector rather than private sector. This is also a slide, and I won't go through this, but on the bottom you see MIGA, and MIGA was one of the 5 institutions that Maria showed earlier, the political risk insurance organization within the World Bank Group. So IFC, in the next slide I will talk about it a bit, we offer political risk mitigation, but we do not insure. MIGA is really an insurer. So you can insure the traditional political risks, like convertibility, transferability risk, nationalization, but also war and terrorism. But increasingly also you can insure with MIGA non-honoring of government obligations, which is pretty important, particularly in basically large infrastructure projects, for instance. So you will get this slide in the deck, and we work quite closely indeed together. And then we have here a slide that shows what I said earlier. We work with investors very much. So if you invest in indeed emerging markets, also with contractors and consultants. So therefore, in terms of the procurement, there will be more talk about it, and exporters. But even I want to say, if you are a consultant and you say, gosh, therefore I don't need financing myself, or you are an exporter and you don't need financing yourself, it is in your benefit that your client in an emerging market performs quite well and does have financing. So therefore, bear in mind that IFC can help your clients in emerging markets. So this is very quickly what we do as IFC. As I said, the added value that we offer is very much risk mitigation. We offer currencies in more than 70 countries, local currency financing. And we help basically clients with our knowledge, both sector-wise and country-wise. This is a slide that shows that we indeed are truly global in terms of what we do and also all kind of sectors. And the last slide here is if indeed you need financing, in a way we act just like a commercial bank would. But our first filter, of course, is the development impact of your project in the country in terms of creates jobs, etc. So I hand over back to Maria, who will talk about the procurement side. Thank you.
This will be very, very fast, so we don't keep our colleagues waiting. So on our procurement framework, operational procurement, how governments are procuring based on our framework, these are the basic principles: economy, integrity, efficiency, as Jan alluded previously. Why should you bid? Jan talked about it, I will not repeat, but here we have grouped the reasons, the variety of contract sizes, the amount of financing that is involved, opportunities to work globally, and all the high standards that are involved in our projects. You will hear about these things from our other colleagues as well. Again, here we have collected a group of links that will help you find all the information. It's all available publicly. We just prepared this additional slide for you. And you find all our processes, the applications, the country partnership framework, where you can find the opportunities, and the steps. As I mentioned previously, you can find publicly available what the work of the World Bank Group entails in each country, review the country partnership framework, look into the planned current projects, and then view the procurement plans to identify the areas of interest to you. Here is the corporate procurement that I mentioned before when we as an institution procure. And I will stop here with our contacts, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody. Yes, my name is Dirk Plutz with an L. I grew up in Germany, and after many other stages in my professional life, I've been working with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or EBRD, in London for a bit more than 20 years, always in the area of procurement. So that's sort of my focal point there. Let's see where we can get the slides going. Yeah, fine. So what is the EBRD? I mean, we've heard from the World Bank. They work basically everywhere in the world. EBRD is a regional development bank. So our world is a little bit smaller, but nevertheless at least as interesting, I would say. So where does EBRD come from? It was actually founded in the wake of the fall of the Berlin Wall, meaning that it was recognized that the countries that had put communism and centrally planned economies behind them needed some help in the transition to market economies. That was basically the main idea where EBRD was founded, and consequently the work focused in the first couple of decades mainly or even exclusively on the Eastern European countries and the countries of the ex-Soviet Union. That was then a little bit later extended to the Western Balkans after the Yugoslav wars were over, and also covered Albania and so on. And Mongolia joined as one of the countries of operation, as we call them. And that was then followed regionally by Turkey. And the last biggest move was then into North Africa, so where we work in the Eastern Mediterranean. So North Africa, we work in countries from, like Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt. And a bit further east around the Mediterranean, we also work in the Palestinian territories, and Lebanon and Jordan. So that's basically our little world. It's not so little, because it stretches quite far outside the Americas. And as I said, as a result of being born out of the collapse of the Eastern communist system, EBRD was founded on the grounds of fostering competitive, inclusive, well-governed, and very importantly, not only these days, but also right from the beginning, green, resilient, and integrated economies. So that was the basis. Here you can see again the countries where we work. I'll leave that with you. So it's altogether countries and regions, altogether 38. And I have to take you through this in quite a bit of tour de force because of time restraints. So bear with me on that if some things get lost. But you will, of course, have this presentation and much more information after the seminar as well. As I said, EBRD was founded in 1991. 71 countries are actually shareholders, or rather 69 countries and 2 international institutions such as the EU and the European Investment Bank, the EIB. The shareholdership is basically, as you can see, mainly European EU countries. but I have to stress this, this bank is not part of the EU system at all. Just the shareholders are majority EU, but we also have large shareholders outside the EU, such as the United States and now that after Brexit, the United Kingdom and other countries such as Japan. We work on the basis of having a capital of 30 billion euros, and that's basically the financial framework we have to work with. Where do we work? If you focus on the right-hand side of this slide, you will see that the sectors are three main sectors. Half of EBRD's investments are done in the broader sense of the infrastructure sector, so transport, energy, municipal facilities in the broadest sense. And then we have some more sort of like a mixed shop of things. Industry, commerce, and agribusiness make up another quarter roughly, and the final quarter goes to supporting financial institutions in the countries that we work in. So basically, in the broad sense, providing credit lines to local banks who then in turn finance sub-projects, mainly to the SME sector. What I should also say, which is a very important feature of EBRD, is that between 70 and 80% of our borrowers are actually private sector clients. So this is where we are close to the IFC, where, as I said, the borrower is a private sector company, but it has to have a link or be based in those countries that we work in. Then we have the rest, the remaining 20 to 30%, who are public sector borrowers, which is more like the other part of the World Bank Group. And so we combine those two, but with a clear focus on the private sector. Nevertheless, when we do work in the public sector, we follow the same principles when it comes to procurement and other framework kind of arrangements that the other banks have as well. Sustainable finance is a very important feature. I want to underline that what Maria said before. We've had, EBRD has had the environmental aspect in its mandate as the first bank of all of the IFIs right from the start. But of course, it has now grown even more important than it was at the beginning. So how do you get involved if you're a company that wants to sort of to partake in this a bit of slice of cake, if I may say? We have, after all, business opportunities in the region, in the public sector, in the region of about 2.5 billion euros per year, which includes something like 200 million euros for consultants. So that's an important sort of benchmark you may want to have a look at. And in the public sector, but also private sector to some extent, but especially in the public sector, we have the procurement policies and rules of EBRD that need to be followed by our public sector clients when they want to award contracts financed by the EBRD. And here you can see again the 2.5 billion annual rough ballpark figure, which changes by 500 million every year. But, you can see that we have quite a few tenders per contract compared to some other things. Of course, the key principles are the same. Maria alluded to them already, economy, efficiency, non-discrimination, transparency, and accountability. So I'll leave it at that with that part. I'm not quite finished yet. One more minute, please. Because the procurement statistic, you can look at your leisure. I put in a slide here as well how many companies were successful, excluding most consultancies, I must stress. So there's more opportunities for consultancies than you see on this slide. And now comes the point where you really, you can really get engaged. I want to mention 3 systems on our website. The first one to look at is on our website, which are the project summary documents. Very, very important initial step into the whole system, because here you can find all the projects, including the private sector ones, in case you want to approach a sponsor of a private sector project. Then, next, those of you who are interested in public sector projects that are financed by EBRD, you should really, and you must, if you're interested and participate, register in our ESEP electronic procurement platform, which is for anything that our borrowers tender out to award contracts on. And then last but not least, for those of you who are consultants only, most consultancy contracts are actually contracted by EBRD itself for due diligence purposes, project preparation in the broadest sense. And for those, we have a separate platform, which is the SMART platform. So, in summary, what you want to look at is project summary documents, ESEP electronic procurement platform for clients, and SMART electronic procurement platforms for consultancy contracts awarded by EBRD. And with that, in this very short time I have, leave you to it, and here are my contact details. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we are moving on to the African Development Bank. Leila.
Thank you very much. I think my development partners, they have made my task easy, because in fact all what they have mentioned in terms of the mission, the objectives, and how we operate are almost the same, including, you know, the procurement policies and rules. But what I wanted maybe as a start to share with you is where the differences are. So the African Development Bank is a regional development institution. We are operating in the 54 countries of Africa, but our shareholding is much larger. So we have obviously the 54 African countries plus 27 countries that we call non-regional member countries, including Switzerland. And the share of the equity always remain 40% non-regional and 60% regional to maintain the Africa ownership of the bank. Second, unlike the World Bank group, we have under the same roof the public sector window and the private sector window. So which, I mean, in our case facilitates also the synergies between the two, including in promoting private sector participations, PPPs, etc. We have, as a group, we have 3 entities. So the African Development Bank, which is financing the middle-income countries, but also from the African Development Bank entity, we also finance directly private sector. We have the African Development Fund, so it's the equivalent of IDA, concessional resources, and the Nigeria Trust Fund. It is clear that it wouldn't come as a surprise that the African Development Bank, the World Bank, EBRD, technically do not differ much in execution of the project, but in fact we are partners because, as we know, the financing gap is huge, and we do partner on many projects in Africa. Some of our recently co-financed flagship projects come from South Africa, so such as Eskom Battery Energy Storage System, Mega Solar Initiative in Namibia and Botswana, the post-cyclone IDA emergency recovery for Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and also other examples of partnering and co-financing are with IFC. We have been assisting South Africa in preparing an investment plan for the consideration of the Climate Investment Fund, and to approve concessional support of 500 million in support of the just energy transition. Maybe I will also very briefly share with you the vision of the African Development Bank and some of our flagship initiatives. The strategic orientation of the African Development Bank are informed by our 5 distinct priorities, namely what we call the high fives. And the high fives have been developed to respond to the challenge of supporting inclusive growth and the transition to green growth by scaling up investment to enable the bank to deliver of its 10-year strategy. And if these high fives are being implemented, and I will name them, 90% of the sustainable development goals will be attained. So we have these 5 priorities are light up and power Africa, integrate Africa, feed Africa, industrialize Africa, and improve the quality of life of people of Africa. And all these are combined in designing and guiding what we call our country strategy papers, which guides our intervention in each and every country. And just before I move to the special initiative, we are organized as a matrix. So we have the regions. We have 5 regions. I'm heading the Southern Africa, but we have North, West, East, Central, and South Africa with director generals. And then we have the sector complexes. In fact, I have my colleagues here with me. So Mike Salau is the director of infrastructure and transport. And we have Ahmed, who is supporting us and supporting Mike, and he's our advisor on the transport sector and advising also our vice president. Some special initiatives that we have is the Desert to Power. So we launched the flagship Desert to Power initiative to create the world's largest solar zone. An intrinsic aspect of the initiative's ambition is to, in the process of addressing energy challenges and resolve extreme poverty, such as migration, resource conflict, food insecurity. And it aims to transform the Sahel region by developing and harnessing a generation capacity of 10 gigawatts by solar photovoltaic system by 2030. Through a combination of on and off grid public and private sector. And the initial focus is on the G7 Sahel country, Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. We have also climate change, which is, So climate change is for our sister organization is critical. So we have put in place and launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program together with the Global Center on Adaptation to mobilize $25 billion for climate adaptation. And we devote 67% of our climate finance to adaptation, the largest of any institution globally, which has been acclaimed even by the UN Secretary General. We have also, mentioned the African Development Fund, our concessional resources. Again, as the World Bank, we have this 3-cycle replenishment. And for this cycle of replenishment that will start in 2023, we are opening a climate action window of up to $13 billion for the ADF 16 replenishment, and it will support climate adaptation at scale, provide 20 million farmers with access to climate smart agriculture technologies, support 20 million farmers and pastoralists with weather indexed insurance, etc., etc. And we have the Green Mobility Facility, so I'm sure Mike will talk about it at the session on Africa, which was created to promote green mobility for public transport in urban areas in Africa. Technologies to be used are electrical vehicles in particular, and we are starting with selected countries from Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and South Africa. The just energy transition is something that we have launched and supported the government in South Africa, and it is critical now that we look forward to decommission, the coal-based energy, And we have a number of instruments and financing, including green climate fund that we are using. And finally, we have the technology for African agriculture transformation, which is which has made a remarkable difference, enabling farmers to increase yields and improve their livelihoods. One example is the deployment of drought-resistant maize, heat-resistant wheat, in particular in Sudan, and treatments against, pests, etc. So I talked about our private sector window. I think we have a range of instruments that we provide to support and to finance directly private sector. And I think I will not go through it in details because it's like our colleague from IFC. So I would like maybe, because from here I'm going to Abidjan to attend the Africa Investment Forum, which was launched in 2018 by the African Development Bank and its partners to accelerate the closure of continent's investment gap. So it operates as a multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary platform dedicated to advancing projects to bankable stage, raising capital, accelerating the financial closure of deals. So far, the African Investment Forum has helped to attract $110 billion of investment interest to Africa. And as I said, the next forum will be in Abidjan from 2nd to 4th of November. So maybe I will conclude on the procurement side. And we have shared with Gabriella, we have shared with Gabriella links where you can find, information on the business opportunities, the tenders, the bidding, and we are looking forward to your questions and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, I think your name got lost here, the whole name. But yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the private sector representatives that are here, and thank you also to my colleagues. It's a delight to be sharing this stage. My name is Fazia Pusterla, and I am the IDB Group representative in our office in Europe. So I will now try, as my colleagues did, to give you a brief overview of what IDB Group does, and then maybe provide some highlights on how well Swiss companies are doing with IDB Group in Latin America and the Caribbean, and then also guide you through how to best know about opportunities going forward. Okay. So the IDB Group is a multilateral regional development bank. We focus on Latin America and the Caribbean. And as you can read there, IDB Group, we have three arms that work together, but are separate. And starting in 1959, the IDB was founded with the objective of working with governments in the region, both in terms of providing finance as well as advisory and technical assistance, policy dialogue, and engagement at all levels of public sector. Then we have IDB Invest, which is our private sector arm. It's a separate entity. The IDB Invest works with private sector with the objective of providing, again, financing, advisory services, technical assistance in most sectors. In terms of instruments, we provide loans, we provide equity, guarantees, blended finance, and as I mentioned, advisory services. Finally, of interest is IDB Lab, is our innovation laboratory. And the objective of IDB Lab is to be able to identify innovative solutions for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we work quite a lot with startups, with venture capital. And imagine this as a continuum. So in many cases, IDB Lab identifies startups that then could grow into becoming clients of IDB Invest. For example, all of these providing solutions to our partner countries. So in terms of who can benefit from IDB Group and who is in our membership, we have 48 countries. 26 of these countries are borrowing, and they are our Latin American Caribbean member countries. We have offices in each of these countries. And this is very important for me to convey to you, because we have a very strong proximity to our clients, both public sector clients and private sector clients. Then we have 22 non-borrowing countries. 2 of them are regional because they are US and Canada, so they are in the Americas. And then we have 16 European member countries, and this is why we have an office in Europe. The office is in Madrid, but we cover all of the 16 member countries. And then we have our office in Asia that covers the Asian member countries. It's very important for me to convey the message of being close as well to the European member countries, because I will end my presentation mentioning the relevance of partnerships. At the beginning, in the introduction, Gabriela mentioned SECO. For example, with Switzerland, we work very closely both with SECO and SDC in quite a lot of interesting projects and sectorial ones, for instance. Let me now mention, in terms of financing opportunities, a bit more of our institutional strategy, our priorities, and how this starts to translate into opportunities. So our institutional strategy focuses on 3, let's say, broad areas, goals. One of them is social inclusion and equality. The following is innovation and productivity. And the third one is regional integration. These 3 broad areas are well connected to 3 cross-cutting themes. My colleagues mentioned them already. So we have gender inclusion and diversity as a cross-cutting theme, of course, climate change and sustainability, and finally, rule of law, which embraces everything related to, improving institutions, transparency. All of these areas are relevant for the 3 parts of the IDB group, so IDB, IDB Invest, and IDB Lab. And again, we work to provide financial assistance, non-financial assistance, policy dialogue, as well as knowledge, expertise, knowledge products. Again, if you visit our webpage, you will find tons of interesting and all public, of course, analysis of all kinds, sectorial, geographical, thematic. So now moving to the financing, and here I've put some numbers that are more related to our public sector operations. In Latin America and the Caribbean, in terms of annual procurement opportunities, so not with IDB, we talk about around 900 billions, okay? IDB covers more or less 2-3, I should have put 2-3% there. I give you last year numbers. In 2021, IDB Group approved 23 billions, okay, for Latin American Caribbean countries, so for these 26 countries. Of these, 6 billion were for private sector projects, so IDB Invest. We mobilized an additional 3 billion, and in terms of, I think, a number that gives you an idea of the transversality of some topics, such as digitalization. Of these 23 billion in operations, 6 billion were dedicated to operations whose objective was digitalization in the region, of all sorts. So cybersecurity, digitalizing small and medium enterprises, digitalizing services that governments provide to citizens, and of course to the private sector. In terms of sectorial distribution, those numbers there, give you an idea of how our current portfolio is distributed. So 50% of our projects go for infrastructure, 20% for what we call institutions for development, which is government strengthening, public sector reform, capital market functioning, fiscal and economic reforms. Then we have social sectors, education, labor markets, health, of course, and social protection. And last but not least, climate change and sustainability. Last year, though, the number I gave you for 2021 showed us that in terms of approval, institutions for development, so government strengthening, basically doubled the approvals that we had in infrastructure. Clearly, we follow also the demand from the region, and this is very interesting because it goes into a lot of strengthening that also becomes an improved enable environment for the private sector. Now I would like to turn into opportunities and show you some numbers about how well European and Swiss companies are doing in the region. So in this slide, you will see that European companies have awarded contracts in all of our 26 member countries in the region. Most contracts were awarded in Haiti, Suriname, Guyana, Peru, and Argentina. In terms of trends of European firms, in this graph on the left, it shows you the success rate of companies that apply to our procurement opportunities. And the numbers are quite interesting because we have a success rate of 32%. And if you look at the right, you can see that the success rate has been growing constantly for non-regional companies in the last 3 years. So this is quite interesting. This is a list of awarded contracts by country, and you can see that Switzerland is more or less midway, and I would like to show you best here what kind of contracts are Swiss companies currently being awarded. So on the left, in general, non-borrowing countries are awarded mostly contracts in goods and works, while less in consulting. For Swiss company, it's the other way around. So Swiss companies are doing really well in gaining consultancies, procurement opportunities. This is with our projects that are being executed in the countries. It's not related to projects, as my colleagues were mentioning, that are consultancies that we as IDB Group can hire directly with a different mechanism. And finally, let me show you in terms of financing directly with IDB Invest. Swiss companies have been doing quite well. In the past 5 years, we've had 31 transactions with 6 different Swiss partners and in different countries in the region. As my colleagues did, you will find all the links where there is public information about IDB procurement opportunities. Just maybe a couple of tips that we always share with private sector in terms of successful bidding. We always suggest to have a long-term perspective with a systematic screening. As I mentioned before, we have these 26 offices in each of our 26 member countries. We have country strategies. These are public documents where you can find the priorities that with each political cycle we renegotiate and we redesign with the country. So go ahead, read these documents, they're very interesting. The second suggestion, which is more mid-term, is that you check project documents and procurement plans that are already available. And the one that is more short-term, of course, look for specific notices that are published. Last suggestion, here are the QR codes. The Connect Americas platform is a sort of Facebook for companies we have created, and it's free. You can register and there get into contact with companies that are already based in Latin America or are interested in Latin America. And this is very useful for you to engage in direct contact. So I would leave it there.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
hope you still can bear with us. We have IDB to come. Thank you very much, Oliver.
Thank you. I thought you were going to cut me. But,
No. We cut the break.
Oh, what else to say? Good afternoon. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Oliver Leonard. I'm from Belgium, and I'm a lawyer, so nobody's perfect. But I work for the procurement department of the bank. I've been with the bank for like 12 years. Most of the time was in Manila, and now I'm based in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, where I basically oversee the procurement and the operations in the region. And before that, I worked for the European Space Agency in Rome, and before at the European Commission in Brussels. Very much thanks to my distinguished colleagues for already saying a lot. And I think it's very important also for you to understand that the way we work, the way we approach the market, the way we design projects, we process projects, is very similar. And for instance, the procurement rules that Maria highlighted are pretty much harmonized, and the way we work is pretty much aligned. So that means basically for you, even if you don't have experience working with Asian Development Bank, but you have World Bank experience or working with other multilaterals, working with us shouldn't come as a surprise, and you should find your way around fairly easily. That means also that even though you may not have experience with us, the World Bank experience, the IADB experience, that similar experience will be regarded as being very valuable and will count when it comes to basically assess your proposals and evaluate. So, there we go. Briefly about IADB, it is also a regional bank that was created in '66. Switzerland joined, I think, in '67, so fairly early, and we currently have 68 members, with Japan and the United States being the main shareholders, basically. So how we work, how we're adding value, well, first through finance, obviously, since we provide our own financing to governments and to other partners. By providing loans, grants, technical assistance, equity investments, guarantees, etc., in order to basically promote development, economic and social development projects. Also, we do mobilize all other sources of funds in order to kind of maximize the impact, the development impact of the project. So we tap other financing sources, be it other partners or commercial sources. Official export credit sources, etc. That's for the financing. The second thing we do also is bringing knowledge, good knowledge of the sectors and the regions where we work in. And so we really focus on the practical local conditions and try to replicate best practices across the portfolio. And finally, we also work through partnerships and facilitate policy dialogue amongst various stakeholders. You're already giving me evil looks, Gabriele.
I'm sorry, you're lost in line.
Now, briefly, the figures, the total sovereign portfolio, and sovereign portfolio, it means basically the loans and grants that we give to governments and that are backed or guaranteed, secured by government guaranteed. The total active portfolio for 2021 was in excess of 100 billion. And you can see the breakdown by region. First, South Asia. India is a very big client, and then it's followed by Southeast Asia and Central West pretty much equally. If we go by sector, you can see the transport and energy account for like half of the portfolio, followed by water, agriculture. And you can see there was a slight decrease in 2021 from transport energy, and it moved to others. Reason being that some of the committed funds and the loans were basically repurposed in order to support COVID efforts. We did a lot of support to government, together with our partners in order to fight COVID. But moving on, in the energy sector, we can see that there is already a shift towards renewable and greener solutions also in the transport sector. And also following the COVID, I think government also realized that the health sector and also education sector needed a bit more focus. So it's going to increase in the coming years. Well, as opposed to sovereign, non-sovereign is basically the support, the financing we give to the private sector, or even to some public entities, but without a sovereign guarantee, basically. And it is about 14 million in 2021, but again, it is rapidly increasing, and we're aiming in the coming years to have it reach about 30% of our total yearly commitment. This is another slide that shows you the breakdown. And you didn't put my last slide, but it's okay. I rely very much on the next session on Asia, where I will give you basically tips on how to find information and how to win contracts. So please, if you haven't joined yet, sign up for the Asia session and you'll get all the information there. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you very much. You were the shortest of all, and we even stole your slide. Thank you very much. You heard now very, I'd say, administratively how the banks work and how you can engage, but still, how do we do it? How do we really do it? And we have two very good examples here. Fulvio and Laura, please join us on stage. We will start with Fulvio from Lombardy that will show us how they engaged in Peru, and afterwards we will hear rather about relationship management from Laura Petersberger. Now, please stay, because probably there might be some questions afterwards before we go to... Yes, please, sorry. We might have time for one question still.
So thank you, Gabriele. Thank you all for coming. Thank you also all to the International Finance Institution to be here and to give their time to us as a private sector. So today I will present something about our experience in drinking water supply project in Lima, Peru, where we have been involved with IFC during more or less three years. But before, I would like to start to present Lombardy Group as our engineering company, then a few words about the project, and then a few points that Gabriella asked me to bring here to this table, related to work for an international finance institution financed project. I mean, our thought as a private sector, and then how something for you, how Swiss company can offer to international finance institution. So this is the picture of our last executive meeting recently in September. We as Lombardy are an international engineering company dedicated to providing engineering solution for civil infrastructure. We are more or less 800 people, a bit more than 800 people, distributed in 13 strategic countries. We are mainly in Europe, India, Australia, and Latin America, which is also the region that I directly manage, and I spent also 10 years more or less living there, so I know more or less the region and the problems there. This is what we do: dams and tunnels, more or less, to be very straight to the point. Are also other kind of underground structures or civil structures for transportation in general. So what about Lima drinking water supply project? It was a very interesting project, a very meaningful project for the country of Peru. Lima is a huge city built above a desert area, so they have a very huge problem related to drinking water. So this project will benefit more or less 1.5 million people. And it was a PPP project, I mean a public-private partnership concept dedicated to the private sector. And the concept was to have this project for 30-year concession, and it's a project more or less with 500 million of value for its implementation. So the main stakeholders were the government of Peru, of course, which is the final owner of the project, but IFC, which was our direct client and was the transaction advisory, that lead all the process. We have been involved as a technical support, as a technical engineer supporting the design of the project and the general structuring of the activities. The project includes two main dams in the upper part of the region, a Trans-Andean tunnel, which is changing the water from one basin to another basin. So even if the space is small, we are basically trying to bring water from the Pacific basin to the Atlantic basin. So the water is coming and then let into the river, and then down in the Lima city there is a treatment plant and then a huge distribution net of more or less 19 kilometers. It was a very interesting project. There was many stakeholders involved, 3 years of different activities, starting from the technical point of view, but also environmental, social, and so on. So, how we have been involved in this project? Of course, there was a competitive bidding process, as always, more or less, in the international finance institution. But why Lombardy? Well, probably because of our company experience in those kind of projects, our dedicated staff experience. I mean, we have people working with us more than 20 years in the same field, so with a huge experience also in the local framework. Our local presence, we have an office in Lima since 2012, where I was during seven years, more or less. And also this, more or less, structure we have as an international company that we have been able to put available the experience of all the entire group. I mean, just giving four or five key people, but we have been able to put available for IFC and for the international finance institution in general, all our experience. So those was more or less, in our opinion, the main points. So how is to work for an international finance institution financed project? This is, of course, our thought, and we try to here represent more or less and to collect also opinion from other subjects of the private sector. Of course, when you work for an international finance institution financed project, we are involved in a meaningful and sustainable project. Both point very important for every company, but also for who is trying to make a difference doing their own job. This is also bringing some advantages in terms of insurance, in terms of obtaining guarantee from banks, and so on. Usually those kind of projects are emblematic, are iconic projects for countries where we are working, especially for underdevelopment countries. And then, of course, compliance with the rules is an additional guarantee that it's coming together with the international finance institution financed project. So it's something that make us as a Swiss company on the safe side respect to those kind of points, which are not always, let's say, clearly stated or clearly available in general in those kind of country, but working with the international finance institution, we have an additional insurance. Main criticalities, probably all those kind of projects are projects under the spotlight, so many stakeholders involved, difficult project, many opinions, different situation to be managed. And also the last point, we are talking about large projects that usually are developed through the more than one cycle of government. And this is not always easy to manage because there is different change in view, different political reason behind some decision taken about the project, and this is something that will bring additional difficulty. So why to choose a Swiss company? And this is more for you. Why we consider that Swiss company are, let's say, the right partner for your project? Well, Swiss is worldwide the reputation for quality and credibility, and this is something that we are always trying to put in front of our project and our presentation. Swiss business people are strict, pragmatic, and unpretentious. This is something that we are trying to put also in our daily job once working for infrastructure in our case. Technological advancement and know-how is something that it's quite often you could find quite often in Swiss company, because the level of innovation is inside the purpose and the culture of every company. So also for personal and for our company experience, when we are doing an engineering services, we are not just delivering services, we are trying to understand how to innovate, how to create value, and to deliver some additional value to our job. And then, well, punctuality is a matter of responsibility, so I will try to stop in a minute. And last but not least, Switzerland is a naturally diverse country. So Swiss corporates are aware of this. We respect diversity as our core value, and we strongly believe that diversity is included in our activities and will improve the purpose and the quality of our services. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the space. I'm working for Leica Geosystems for more than 10 years. And in my role, I'm acting as a hub between the IFIs and the companies, or between the banks and the companies, identifying business opportunities, promoting our solution, and hopefully gaining successful projects. So in the next few minutes, I'll be talking about my experience with engaging in these banks during the last 10 years. And I have just one slide, so 3 points I'm talking about, trying to keep it short. The first important step, which you already heard from the MDBs, from the banks here, is to understand in which sectors they are active, which are their initiatives, in which countries they operate, and get familiar with the project cycle, which is different from bank to bank, slightly different sometimes from bank to bank, with the procurement process. Once you have identified the sector of interest, search for what I call a knowledgement hub, knowledgement platform, which can be nowadays a virtual platform or an event. Ideally hosted, speaking out of experience, ideally hosted from the banks themselves or co-hosted from the banks, as you reach a much broader audience this way. And I give you one example. Leica Geosystems is a geospatial technology provider, and our main pillar is surveying. So we are very active in cadastre projects. And years ago, I realized that the World Bank is hosting, under the umbrella of land management, annually event conference, which is called the Land and Poverty Conference. And it was, since more than 10 years, I'm attending this conference with a clear purpose, again, to, besides the interesting presentation, the best practices, which you hear from all the participants, it turns out to be a great platform to showcase the solutions. So to have presentation, to have a stand, to showcase what you can bring to the table, to position yourself, and connecting a network, an excellent networking event, as you connect not only with the banks, if you have specific project question or procurement question or general, you connect as well with the agencies from the different countries, the governmental. In the World Bank, it's very often governmental agencies, ministries who are there. So instead of going to visit them in their country, you can meet them, you can talk about specific themes. So it's it was for us a great, an excellent networking opportunity, and still is. We're still going for more than 10 years attending this conference. But of course, as all the networking events, they are only as useful as if you do a follow-up. So we are doing a follow-up. I'm doing the follow-up with the banks and with, again, with the clear purpose of promoting the technology or finding project business opportunities. And my colleagues in the countries are doing the follow-up as well with the same purposes inside the country, so that we are ready if a project comes out. So we placed ourselves. So to wrap it up, I think I spoke fast as well, but to wrap it up, look for every opportunity as an advice for the companies who want to engage with the banks. Look for every opportunity you get to raise your hand, to position yourself, and consider it a long-term strategy, which requires time and persistence. And with this, thank you. I open the floor for questions or maybe the break.
We are running very slightly behind schedule, but I think one or two key questions we can ask now. Be aware that, as Oliver already said, we will have the regional breakouts where it's really going to be workshop kind of. You will be having a presentation that is small and short, rather about the regions, but then it is that you can engage with your bank partners in asking the questions in detail in the region, and in the second breakouts then in the sectors. But is there any question that goes to the audience right now? Yes?
Yeah, so this is more of a strategic question for the bankers. I'm not a banker myself, but it's interesting to hear your view about a lot of the financing that you get comes from governments as well as private sector, right? Strategically, as you know, as we go along, there is new capital that's coming through DeFi, cryptocurrencies, e-digital stable coins, and so on and so on. Where do you see this fitting as part of the investments, one of the investments that you could get? Because one of the things about this type of decentralized financial systems, it really enables you to accelerate your key mission, which is to increase world parity between developing countries and developed countries and reduce poverty. Because when you look at it, countries like Asia Pacific, LATAM, Africa, many of these countries, actually, when you see the power of these young tribal people who control their own financial systems, banking, paying through rice, through their own smartphones, that to me is an unusual power, people power. At the moment, we see institutional power, we see governmental power, but when do we see people power coming as part of the decentralized financial systems that could be extremely useful for accelerating your goals?
And who would like to answer this question? Yeah?
Thank you for asking this question. A couple of reactions. I mean, unfortunately, if you think about developing the projects that take place in emerging countries, be it exports, consultancy, investment itself, to help basically the countries develop, right? So that unfortunately there is really a shortage of bankable projects in emerging countries. You probably face it yourself as well. The projects that you actually want to engage in, generally there is sufficient supply of money going into emerging markets. Actually there is. Now, for your point, yes, it is basically an additional source as well. Yeah. And I think what we try to do is channel it through capital market development. So that means use those funds, use them through capital market development, and create with that a local capital market or enhance the capital market, create an institutional investor base in these countries, also have local currency financing, what you for instance say, in these countries itself. So yes, work is being done indeed on that. Yeah.
There is. Lars, I think yes, you can. Yeah, you're.
I like the idea of the IDB lab a lot, Because like this, you can take projects from start to scale up. Do the other banks have similar ideas and entities in place?
No. No.
No, sorry. I mean, sorry, I just want to see. Yes, I mean, as IFC, we don't have a separate entity for it as such, but we are very active in, let's say, the venture capital side of the business. So we have a department within IFC who focuses on this. We call it disruptive technologies. As IFC, we invest in 350 private equity funds, and increasingly many of those are also basically the startup funds. And so we do get involved in it, but I don't think as systematically as IDB probably does.
Can I add just one point on that? Thank you very much. And very much combined with that is the work that we do as World Bank Group, together with our colleagues on the policy side, on the enabling environment on competitiveness, finance, and innovation through our global practice in the bank. So this is the 360 of how we can create the enabling environment and also support on the private sector side. Thank you.
Thank you.